Hello, everyone. Welcome to my podcast. I reviewed some of the podcasts from last year that were your most favorite, and I thought I would comment and share some of those comments with you today. I really enjoyed myself last year. I learned a lot, and I thank you all for listening and for commenting, and I look forward to this year in 2025. Thanks very much.
And I'm sure you know that because you've been married for so many years.
35 years.
35 years.
And I've known him for something like 55 years.
Really?
Yeah, we met when we were 7 and 8 years old.
What?
So
Tammy,
I can see him sometimes as a little boy, and he can see me as a little girl.
Are you?
Yeah.
It's the cutest thing I've ever heard.
Did your parents, I'm sorry.
We lived on the same street.
Wow.
He moved to town when we were in grade 3.
That is.
And lived right across from me.
That is the cute. And can I ask, I know this is your show, but I'm just so curious because I know that you guys went through a period of time, you and Mr. Peterson, where you had to separate. Everybody in your family got sick at the same time, right?
Yeah. We had very many challenges that year, mine being cancer, and Jordan. And so I guess, we didn't know this, but if you go off antidepressants too quickly, it'll cause these kind of weird hallucinogenic episodes. It just inflammation in the brain, right? And so it does all kinds of things. And so they ate something they shouldn't have when we were with my family at Christmas. And then he came home and he couldn't get out of bed. He was not sleeping. He was anxious beyond belief. And then he had to go back to work and teach, and he thought, well, I can't do that. So he went to the doctor and said, give me something. I can't sleep, and I'm just out of my mind with anxiety. So they gave him a benzodiazepine and a sleeping pill, and he took the sleeping pill just for a little while, but he said the anxiety went away when he took that, and so he continued to take that. But then if you take it long term, it starts to work against you.
Yep.
It was complicated, and he was so complicated, he had to live in a different house.
I know.
I think God came to me when he did, for whatever reason, so that I could support George. Because, if George would come home and he would like, I'm done, and I'd say, I have hope. I have hope. We're going to get through this. You're going to go back on tour and stuff, as he was suffering away. But this is the thing, right? God gives us tools to deal with life's tragedy, because we're going to all have tragedy. All of us. Doesn't matter who we are. Tragedy's coming.
Yeah.
Get prepared, read the Bible.
Yeah.
So that was Angela and Ari, Girls Gone Bible. It was a very lovely talk with those ladies. They are on a path that many of us could look into, I think, because it's a path of letting God guide us in our everyday life. And I have found, since I've begun to do that, which was not that long ago, 2019, I can't believe the changes that have come about in my life. I mean, I travel all over the world with my husband, and I get up on stage and I speak, and I wasn't a public speaker. But when I was sick, in that time I prayed to God and I said, God, if you see it as a possibility and you let me live, I promise I'll speak publicly. And now I've been given these tasks to do, and I believe that these tasks are given to us if we are open and willing to step aside and not be the one who controls, not be the one who thinks they have the answers. We have work to do because it is the action that we take, but it's the intention at the beginning of every action that we take that guides us in the right direction. And this conversation with these ladies was a lot like that. They were searching for what the next right thing was to talk about. And so it was easy. It was an easy conversation and very full of God and the possibility of finding a better way in life. So That was a great conversation. I wish them well over the next year in 2025. And so then I have another one here. Erica Commissar.
Now, why would you say that? Why would daycare be the least?
So children under the age of 3 don't need group socialization.
Right.
They need one-to-one nurturing from a sensitive, empathic caregiver who provides them with that soothing when they're in distress from moment to moment, and helps them to regulate things like sadness, fear, anger, excitement. And that's not happening in daycare because the ratio of adults to children in daycare is usually no less than 5-1. Sometimes
At what age? At what age 5-1?
At 6 weeks. You're not going to.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So they might tell you it's 3-1, but inevitably with 6-week-olds, inevitably it's not cost effective for them to do it for less than 5-1. It's
Fair
usually 8-1 when they get to be 1 or 2 years of age. And in Sweden, it's 12-1. Mothers are meant to keep babies' levels of stress down. There's a small, little, very primitive part of the brain called the amygdala, and it is the stress regulating part of the brain, and it's meant to remain offline for the first year. So in other parts of the world, mothers carry babies on their bodies, and those babies don't cry very much because they're getting what they need from their mothers. They're hearing their mother's heartbeat, their skin-to-skin contact, they're with their mother all day long, and their mother, through their body and through their presence, is soothing and regulating that baby's emotions all day long. The studies show that children that are put into daycare for long hours, the result is high levels of behavioral problems and early signs of aggressive behavior when they get to the school years. And the reason for that is those children go into fight or flight. And what we're also seeing is a lot of children at a very early age being diagnosed with ADHD, which is nothing more than distractibility, which is the flight part of fight or flight.
Right. So because their attachment is, because this is what you're saying, I think because their attachment has been broken with their mother, then the result of that is a reactionary response where they turn away.
Right. That was Erica Commissar. She's done a lot of work to help mothers understand their babies. You know, we have a society where everybody works and prices have gone in step with that, so that the price of house is much higher now because there's 2 income people in each marriage, the mother and the father work. But this is something that is very important to families. And, you know, I'm a grandmother, so I'm at the point where I'm very curious to say the things that I could have heard when I was a young woman. And, you know, a lot of the work that I'm doing with young women, I think, you know, when I was young, I probably didn't treat myself as well as I might have. And I'd like to make amends with myself by speaking to young women as if maybe I was one of those women and atone for the misunderstandings, maybe you know, I had greed, or maybe I was slothful or jealous, or, you know, any of the sins that I was committing and have that impact my family. And so we're just talking about daycare here. We're talking about mothers and fathers deciding that daycare is necessary for the first 3 years we're talking about. So the first 3 years, but maybe even say the first year. And in Canada, we have a year of mat leave. So it is possible to stay home with your child. And it's a challenging environment. There's a lot to learn. We don't know what we're doing when we're young parents, especially with the first baby. It's all new to us. And we think, oh, geez, we're not prepared, but we are prepared. We're as prepared as any other mother's ever been who's a new mother. as long as we surround ourselves with people who've gone before us and learn from what they've learned, then we can inform ourselves in the moment while we have our children. And, those little babies, I was noticing my grandson the other day, and he's to the point where he was starting to creep around and crawl. And he would turn around and he would look at me every minute. Is this the right direction, Grandma? He's trying to find feedback, not just for his emotions, but even for his action and where he was going in the room. They are constantly looking back to find information from their mother or from their grandmother or from whoever is constantly in their life. Now, if the people are changing all of the time, if the workers are different all of the time, then it's more tricky for a child to look to that person and get a reaction that is in keeping with the other reactions that they've accumulated on different days. If you have one person, the mother, the father, the grandmother, the nanny who's constant there, the au pair who's there for a good long time, usually at least a year. If you have somebody there and it's them, then the child is going to be able to look to them and understand their response, because it'll be in keeping with the response before. So when they try something new, they can see, is this the same kind of situation of the other one? And do I get the same response or do I get a different response? Is this, so there's a lot for little babies to learn. They have a lot of work to do and they need the feedback. And so it's up to us. It's up to us to give them that feedback. And if you have the right idea about it, I think it's a time of humility, because the baby, you'll find when you have a baby, is much more important than you. This is a new life with a new beginning. And it's something that we can be in service to, is our babies. And they're worth it. That's the thing. I really think that I want to help young women find the inspiration to get married and have children, and also to nurture their marriages, negotiate with their husbands so that they can limit the resentment and the fear in their relationships. And it's up to both the mother and the father to communicate that, so that they have to communicate until they have an understanding with one another, so that one isn't dominating and one isn't the victim. That's not helpful. And it doesn't end well, because it ends in divorce. And divorce isn't helpful to the children, because it is the children that we are really in service to. It's about them. It's not about what we want in the moment. It's not about that at all. It might have been that when we were 2, but it is no longer that, because now we're grown up. We've made our choices, and now we have to be responsible for the service that we're providing for the children that we have. It's it's the only way to really grow up, is to have children. So if you want to be a mature adult, every person wants love and wants to give love. Getting married and having kids, that's where you find that. And that gives you such a stable place to go from if you want a career as well. So these things can be done. They just have to be done in an order, because women only have a certain amount of time. There was a new study I saw yesterday. There was something posted on X that fertility is very high at 20. It's not so high at 30, and then it really falls off. So by the time you're 33, you're starting to have birth defects and more difficulty having babies. And so that's too late. So we really have to start much younger. And so it's up to us to talk about this. And be brave about it. Let's just talk about this, because we need our young people to feel they have the support and also the excitement of starting a family, because it's one of the most exciting things that you can do. My husband has an amazing career. And when you ask him what's most important. He says it's his family. I mean, it's such a fulfilling undertaking. And you'll never know that until you have a family. So there's no sense being skeptical of it. If it's something you haven't attained, it's actually something to be curious about and to investigate. Young, when you're like 18 years old, start thinking, you know what? Having a family will give me the support and the love, and I will be able to add to the prosperity of my family by taking care of my kids. And later I can work, and there's plenty of time to work. You know, if you have kids between 20 and 30, then by the time you're 40, your kids are 20 years old. You have a tremendous amount of time to devote yourself to your family and to society. So, yeah, it's a very, very interesting conversation with Erica. I really enjoyed it. And I think it's very important for all of us. Let's do this one. This is Kayla Pollock, and Kayla is very damaged from the COVID vaccine. And I wanted to give her a platform to share that with people. So let's look at that.
Oh, yeah. You were offered medically assistance in dying. 3 times.
3 times. So when I first became paralyzed, for instance, when I got to the ER, I was paralyzed from the neck down. I woke up that way. The day before, we had celebrated Family Day weekend. We were out hiking with the dog, all sorts of things like that.
What had happened to your legs at the beginning?
I just fell, and I've had an epidural, so I know what being paralyzed feels like.
Right.
And I'm like, I feel like I'm paralyzed in my legs. They're just not working. Huh. But then 20 minutes later, I would get up. So when I came in completely paralyzed from the neck down, the doctor told me that this was in my head,
right?
That it was a psychiatric issue. Another doctor came along and said, I think there's something seriously wrong with you. I don't think this is in your head. I will take you immediately to an MRI machine if you want. I have a radiologist at home on standby, ready to read your results right away. Do you want to go? I said, absolutely, let's go. And that's when they found a massive inflammation all the way up through my spine. I started telling my boyfriend at the time, I started telling him, record everything, because I know what this is from. I know exactly what this is from, and no one's going to believe me. Mm-hmm. I mentioned my COVID shot. I gave the dates. I gave all the information. And I did get a recording of a neurologist before I had all the work rule outs, like ruling out cancer, ruling out MS, ruling out infection, ruling out COVID. He said, my gut is it's not a tumor, that it's caused by the vaccine. So I got that on tape. I also got another doctor on tape.
And so when did they offer you MAID?
They offered me medical assistance in dying before I went into rehab because they said I'd have to live in a long-term care home. So if you want anything in Canada, that when you're in my situation, you have to be loaded. Most wheelchair vehicles now cost about $100,000. Mm-hmm. Physiotherapy, $20,000 a year. Or someone to come in once a night to turn me in and empty the bag, $45 a day. So $50 a day. This is an astronomical cost. I think that medical assistance in dying in Canada is actually Canada's way of saying to people, we don't have the services you need, so your best option is just to die.
Right.
Because it would be less painful to die than to go through the torture of not having any services.
Right.
Let's just save money on healthcare by killing everyone.
Yeah.
And do I agree with that? Absolutely not.
So Kayla Pollock came on my podcast. It was a while back, but it was this year. And I met her and her caregiver and saw how he had to lift her into his van because she doesn't have a van that takes a wheelchair. She hasn't had financial help. She's very tough. She's a very tough woman. And she's gone through hell, I would say, since having the COVID vaccine, which she got because her father was in long-term care and she wasn't allowed to go see him without the vaccine. So she had the vaccine. You can follow her on X, Kayla Pollock, KaylaPolluck. See how she's doing. She could always use some financial help and some tender responses to her situation. I mean, Canada has so many troubles now. Justin Trudeau has taken this country from a place where it was prosperous to now being a place where I bought laundry soap, and not a lot of laundry soap yesterday. It was a normal sized container of laundry soap, and it was $30. $30. Are you kidding me? You know, how are people affording to buy anything right now? And he's not going to step aside. He doesn't care about us. He doesn't care about the Canadian people. He doesn't care about his caucus. Otherwise, he would step down because they want him to step down. He's still staying in office because all he thinks about is himself. He's waiting to go work at an NGO and find his new place of power. There's no help for these people who've been damaged by this vaccine, and the doctors who've lost their licenses because they wouldn't insist on people getting the vaccine, where they would find different remedies, ivermectin, different remedies to help people. They had their license suspended. Some of them have fought the system, but even the going to court now is not all that helpful because it's difficult to find judges who go on precedent instead of within these identity categories that people are using to group identity that we're living by now as the best indication of what an individual needs, and it's all a lie. It's all a lie. I'm sure there's still more to find out once the Liberals are eradicated in Canada. We'll find out actually just how much trouble we are in. So we'll have to get ready for that because we don't know. We don't know. But rest assured, it's not a happy story. So get ready for that. It's not that I don't have any hope. I do have hope because I think there's lots of good people who can turn this around. And now we've learned our lesson too. We've learned our lesson that we have to be careful and not to give away our responsibilities to other people, that we have to take responsibility ourselves, because whoever will take over from us isn't who we want to be taking over from us. So we have to step up and take responsibility in our societies for, our civil rights and for our families. It's brutal. It's not a happy ending story. This isn't a happy ending story. Not now, it isn't. But there are many people fighting against the established system that is not accepting the mistakes that have been made, not only for the vaccine, but for the gender identity surgeries that are being foisted upon our young. We're not taking responsibility for that either. And so all of this has to change. Medical assisted dying. It started out by an idea of it was a compassionate bill that we would help people who are suffering and have no way to improve their lives, but it's creeping into our society to people who have mental health issues that can be improved by diet. A lot of these things that are happening in MAID, we're giving up on each other. We can't give up on each other. My sister just died 3 days ago. She had dementia for 20 years. She was 70 when she died. God rest her soul. And my other sister took care of her. She lived in her home right up until she couldn't do it anymore. So my sister wasn't in long-term care for very long. And the people who took care of her in long-term care were very good. They, right up until the end, they were very respectful of her and did a good job taking care of her. But, this is a problem too with MAID is I could connect with my sister right up until the end, She knew who I was. She couldn't move. It was really only through her eyes that I could see and a little bit in her face that I could see her joy. But that meant everything to me. So I don't know about this MAID. It's trouble. As far as I can see, it's trouble. And I think that people, military people have been offered MAID because they suffer from, the trauma of war. Like that's not helpful. We don't need to take the pressure off the healthcare system because people are ill. That's not a good reason for MAID. We have to realize that these people that are being offered MAID, we like to think that people have the right idea about offering MAID, but we have to think more deeply than that and look into things and not just accept it at the superficial level. That's what all these podcasts are about, is to try to dig into issues so we can understand them better. And it's uncomfortable, but it's not as uncomfortable as it would be if you avoid understanding. So I recommend we pay attention so when the next thing happens, we are more prepared to stand up and say what we think and defend our civil rights, our freedom of speech, all of that. That's a tough one. Paralyzed by the COVID vaccine, that's a tough one. But I'm hopeful because people are speaking up. And the media, the legacy media, they're not covering these types of things, but the podcasters are. And so it gives us some hope because then we know what's going on. And you can't do anything if you don't know what's going on. So, let's support one another. Ellen, or about the carnivore diet. Let's talk about that. When you first change, and I didn't change the diet from North American diet, carnivore diet.
Gradually, otherwise
it was
your body
over 20 years for me. Yeah. But if people do that really, really fast, they get something called a Herx reaction, and it's a flu, and it's nasty. So the best thing to do is to cut out gluten and dairy first. Yeah. If you have any chronic disease that you can't understand and can't get an answer from, so you haven't managed it and it's still plaguing you, even things that you think, well, I'm getting older, so my knees are going to hurt. Oh, my sight is going to go, my hearing is going to go, like all these things. Those are chronic diseases. You think, oh, that's called aging. Well, is it? I'm not sure. Yeah. So, I'm really not sure. And so if you have something chronic, then you start by eliminating gluten and dairy and you get rid of all the sugar in your diet, and especially for cancer, because cancer grows on carbohydrates. Yeah, totally. And carbohydrates, that means everything that isn't a fat or a protein, everything else is a carbohydrate. That's all fruit, all vegetables, all grains, all glucose of any kind, because it's a different metabolism, ketogenic diet. It means a ketone diet, which means that you're switching from one metabolism to another. You're not in the glucose metabolism anymore. That's what gives you this Hertz reaction, because you're switching from a glucose metabolism of every cell in your body to a ketogenic metabolism, and that's different. So it takes a while for your body to switch over, and in that time, you don't feel so good. That's why you do it a little at a time. Reverend Helen Orr, she's a pastor in the UK. Her father was a pastor for Queen Elizabeth. Helen before she was a pastor, she was a singer, and she had albums, and she was a very good singer. We had her actually up to the lake, and she sang for some of the music that we're still working on, and that was a gift because she has a great voice. But here she is with me, letting me talk about my diet. I haven't talked about it very much, so Helen allowed me to talk about my diet, and I'm alive. I didn't expect to be. I've been sick, very sick a few times, right? So I thought my life was over, but it wasn't. So now I'm here to bother everybody about what they're eating. That's really what it is. But, I see people now, and I see people in chronic pain, and I just want them to try to change their diet, to get rid of all the sugar. I think that we'll look back on sugar and see, it was the worst thing ever. The cigarette companies, when they discovered that you get lung cancer, you get all kinds of cancers, you can get lip cancer, you can get all kinds of cancers from smoking. And people stopped buying cigarettes as much because it was now associated with terrible chronic disease that could kill you. They turned to the food industry. And they made processed carbohydrates, making life easy for people, so you could just snack through the day, and that would be fine because you didn't even have to have a kitchen or a stove to cook, because you could just eat on the run because it's easy. But if it's easy like that, you kind of got to wonder, you kind of got to think, this is pretty easy. The devil makes things easy. When I was ill and I started trying to really pay attention to God's will, my life got much harder. It got much more challenging. It got much more rewarding, but it got much more challenging too. And the thing about eating just meat, if you try it, it sounds expensive. It sounds boring. It sounds isolating. My husband was worried about that. We like to socialize with lots of people, and what are they going to think of us if all we eat is meat? Are we going to be cut off from everyone? He's very extroverted. He loves to be around people. So he thought that it was going to get in our way socially. And it probably did get in our way somehow, but it didn't cut us off from people. It gave us time to be with people because we weren't bothering ourselves cooking all day or even eating many times a day. Because when you eat this way, you eat once or twice a day. And it takes you 10 minutes. It's a lion diet. You wolf down your food. It's not the same anymore. And often, people, they think, they know, like, maybe I should try this diet. They kind of have an inkling. Maybe I should try this diet. And they wonder, but why do they wonder that? There's probably something bothering them that they're not really conscious of, but maybe they're overtired. And more than they ought to be, maybe they don't have the concentration that they ought to have. And they notice that. They notice that maybe their thinking isn't as clear as it should be, or that they nap in the days, or maybe like me, fall asleep just putting my shoes on. Eating a North American diet was definitely not helpful It was definitely not helpful to me. And I wasn't I exercised lots. But then I would look at my body and I'd think, I'm just I don't look as healthy as I ought to with all the things that I do, because I'm trying to do what's good for me, healthy for me. And still, I don't look the way that I think I ought to. I have too much, I have like wobbly triceps and a spare tire around my middle when I was middle-aged, and more inflammation under my chin. What's that all about? What was it all about? My body was struggling with the food I was eating, and the fat that you have on your body, your fat has a function. It's storing toxins. It's trying to get rid of all the toxins that you're eating. And so you pack on fat to try to save yourself as a last ditch attempt. This diet is radical. But all you eat is meat, if that's all you're spending your money on, it's not that expensive. Because I eat, I think I've heard, half a cow a year. Right. So we don't eat that much, and we don't eat that often, and you don't snack. So the things that cost money are all the snacking and the desserts and all of that. That's that's like a hole in your pocket. That's what that is. And it'll catch up to you. Like by the time you're 40, you'll start to see that you'll be putting on pounds, and you won't be as sharp anymore, and you won't have the energy anymore. And that can all turn around. All you have to do is drop all of that easy food and be grateful for the steaks that you can buy, the hamburgers that you can buy, and you can make it cheaper too. You can buy a roast and you can cut it into steaks. There's ways to cut down on the cost. There's no doubt about it. But if the eco freaks weren't causing so much trouble in the meat industry, it wouldn't be so expensive. But people are so concerned with cows farting, like Bill Gates and his new drug that we're giving to cows in Canada so that they don't burp and fart. That's not helpful. It's not helpful putting additives in our food. We don't want it, right? We don't want it. And we have to speak out about what we find is harmful to us and to our children, right? We have to pay attention to that. So I told Helen all about my journey through. You can watch it if you want. My journey of finding health after having cancer, and it was quite a journey. And I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for cows. I'm grateful for farmers. Very grateful for the farmers who take care of the cows. And I think that it would be best if the government wasn't involved in making people send their cows to feedlots before people can buy them. That's not helpful. It would be good if we could buy straight from the farmer. Then we would support the farmers, and we wouldn't be, I imagine we'd be paying more if they go through the feedlots and then they're sold in stores through the feedlots, that the prices will go up. So there's work to do. There's work to do in, getting rid of this climate change trouble. That's all lies. We don't have any trouble with our climate any more than we're already, doing. The people in Alberta, they have worked so hard to make sure that the oil and gas industry is as clean. You can look up Alex Epstein. He's more and more knowledgeable about that, and he also has a lot of policies that he's promoting that people who are working in that industry could look up, because he's got helpful advice for people in supporting the oil and gas industry in Canada, which, supports the rest of the country. I think people in Canada forget that, but the oil and gas industry supports everyone in the country. And the United States would like to buy our oil and gas, and so would the Germans and the French, and they've come to our country and asked us for oil and gas. And Justin Trudeau said that he couldn't find a business plan necessity for selling oil and gas to Europe. He's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, So the sooner we let him retire, the better. Helen is trying this diet, so she's very curious. She wanted to know about it. She wanted to know how it could be helpful to her. I'll have to reach out to her and see how she's doing. So my last podcast that I'm going to inflict on you is with Bishop Barron, and I went to Word on Fire, and I spoke with him, and it's always lovely to speak with him. So here it is. I found Isaiah 41:10, and I thought it talked to me. It said, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness." So that's a prayer that I could pray every day. And I could pray that every day.
Yeah. To turn your life over to God. That's prayer if you want. So there's that find the place where you're here now being created by God. I've turned my life over to God. So I'm being held in his hand. Also Isaiah, right? I've carved you in the palm of my hand. I will never forget you because I've carved you in the palm of my hand. Prayer is getting in touch with that.
Right.
That's where the discipline of prayer on a regular basis is, to get in touch with that truth. Right?
Yeah, and I think when I'm good and I'm praying and I'm staying present, the things that occur aren't usually what I think is going to occur. And I ask at the end of my prayer, what is God's will for today? And then I try to notice it in the day.
Yeah, it's a prayerful attention to the day.
Yeah.
And and he said, Ignatius himself said, if you were to lose all of the forms of prayer, but kept that one, you'd keep the essence of it. It's very powerful. So the end of the day, if you say, okay, in the presence of God, I'm going to review my day and say, what happened? For the good, for the bad. Why was I with Tammy Peterson today? Why did she cross my path?
Right.
What happened in that conversation? Lord, what did you want? What did I miss? What opportunity, right? Where did my ego get in the way of something? That's the consciousness examine, which is a very useful exercise, especially at the end of the day. And even if you're in bed at night, just close your eyes and just do a kind of review of the day. Let it go past your mind's eye. And not in a negative way, but kind of like evaluate it in light of God. What was God doing? What was he up to? What was he inviting me to through these things?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful form of prayer.
I'll have to watch that whole podcast again, I think. It's always, I'll find something in it for sure. God will have, brought me something there that I need, I'm sure. Speaking with Bishop Barron it was comfortable. I was comfortable to speak with him. He's very warm and inviting, he's a joy. He was a joy to be around. And this is quite a journey that I've been on, and more people are getting on this journey. I just saw yesterday that Brad Pitt has decided that he's become a Christian. He was raised a Christian, but then left the church, and he saw what he thought was a miracle. And I guess it was at the right time and in the right place. And he's decided that he's going to become a Christian again. And that's happening with young men. Young men are going back to church, and young women are beginning to follow. I watched a young man yesterday, a podcast. Oh, I can't quite remember his name, but he was talking about the Protestant faith, and he noticed how young men were going back to the faith, but they weren't going back to the American Protestant church. They're going back to the Catholic church. And so he's wondering, and he had been wondering already before he had listened to Chris Williamson. Was it Chris Williamson? I think it was. Who'd gone to church in the States, and he went to a Protestant church, and he saw everyone. He saw a band playing, and he thought, "Is that church in America?" And he was surprised. And this young Protestant said, "I've been thinking about this. You can get music and singing in many places, in many different venues. But what is the message from our Protestant church services? Is that a message to offer the chance to become closer to Jesus Christ? Because that is the hope when you go to church, that you will feel something when you go there, that you will have a feeling of hope and some levity when you leave. And he's wondering whether the Protestant church is doing its work or not. So that was very interesting. But I've gone back to the Catholic church. My grandmother was Catholic, and it felt like the right thing to do for me. So I went back to the Catholic church, and I searched around for a church that was as traditional as I could find, that has some Latin Mass in it, that is a lot of the service, it's a sung service. So there's the sermon is sung there. And I've been interested in beauty, and what we offer to God is beauty, and the singing is beauty. And so I've been curious about how I can, be in reverence to God more in my life. And so I want my church service to be a part of that. And so that's why I've chosen to go in that direction, is I want it to be beautiful and challenging too, because some of it is in Latin, and I don't speak Latin. So now I have to learn Latin. So there's also challenge in it. And I appreciate that as well, to keep me sharp, to keep me still learning, because here I am and I want to keep learning. And that's why when I talked to Bishop Barron, it was so good, because he has much to teach us. And I got to sit there and have a one-on-one conversation with him. And I hope maybe that can happen again someday, because it was great. So that's another episode that you could watch if you want. And so that's all of the clips that I have today. I hope these moments reminded you of the power of reflection, self-reflection. I think that we don't do enough self-reflection. And, Bishop Barron mentioned at the end of the day to reflect on the day, to see where you've been resentful and fearful, to see if you've done any harm, and to take action on those thoughts to make things better, and to be grateful for the day, and to be thankful for whatever you've learned in a day, or whatever challenges came your way, because I have a whole different idea about challenges now. I see them as challenges that God has sent me. When things don't go the way I want them to go in a day, I think, God's he's reminding me not to get ahead of myself, to be humble and to listen and to be attentive to my surroundings so I can see what is offered so I can make the next right step. And so I'm hoping that in 2025, we can all be mindful to listen carefully to each other and to ourselves, to be aware of our surroundings and to take our cues from the environment so we know what the next right step is. And I wish everyone a happy new year, and I look forward to 2025 and doing podcasts all year and doing this again next year. Thank you so much for listening. And I love your comments. It helps me to know what to do next. So I really appreciate my audience to see what it is that you're looking for. So don't hesitate to tell me what you think. I'll look at the comments and see what I can do. Take care, everyone. Thank you.